Hello everybody and welcome back to another Reggae Spotlight edition of Fat City Vinyl. This time I'm going to be starting something a little bit different. My previous ones have been focused on individual artists. I'll still do some of those down the line. But right now I want to do a couple based on reggae record labels, and more particularly labels from more of the modern time frame where they began taking kind of a historical and archival interest in representing this music for a new generation of listeners that weren't around at the time they originally came out or weren't able to get them. The most preeminent of these in the time frame I'm going to be looking at was called Blood and Fire Records. I'm going to be looking at them today. Blood and Fire was a label formed in 1994, kind of formed around Steve Barrow, who was a longtime reggae collector, historian. He'd spent much of the 80s doing compilations for Trojan Records, which had been around for many years, but by that point was beginning to put out historical compilations with kind of improved track listings, liner notes, better artwork than maybe you'd seen from reggae releases in decades before, rather than just putting out current or recent music as they had been before in previous decades. Steve Barrow was a prime mover in bringing up the standard of quality, which in reggae releases had tended to be kind of slapped together at times. Now, in the 1993, he had put out a 4-CD box set for Island Records. I showed this in my Prince Buster tribute, called Tougher Than Tough, The Story of Jamaican Music, which was an attempt to tell over 4 CDs the entire history of Jamaican music, obviously in a highly concise fashion. And it had great photos, essays. You can see there. This kind of encapsulated what Barrow wanted to do when the time came to form his own label. Now, Blood and Fire was a partnership comprised of him. Was partly financed by Mick Hucknall, the lead singer of 80s band Simply Red, perhaps best known for their song If You Don't Know Me By Now. And the first release on Blood and Fire came in 1994 with a various artists compilation called If DJ Was Your Trade, The Dreads at King Tubby's. The DJs were kind of similar to rappers, what you would call. I've talked a bit about this before, where they would talk or chat over music tracks. So you have Iroy, Big Joe, Tapazuki, Dr. Alimantado on here. That is BAF CD 001. I also have this on vinyl. I was buying most of these on CD at the time as they came out, but I've since managed to pick up a few on vinyl. DJ Was Your Trade, The Dreads at King Tubby's, BAF LP 001. Following on as kind of a sequel to that release was Dub Gone Crazy, The Evolution of Dub at King Tubby's. Dub would be quite a strong component of the Blood and Fire catalog. Next up, the third release was Pick a Dub by Keith Hudson. Essential early dub album. Family Man Barrett from the Bob Marley and the Wailers band on there. Next up, Burning Spear, Social Living. Burning Spear, a longtime roots reggae singer. This album originally came out in the 70s on Island Records. That one's long since out of print. Next up began an archival series of releases of Yabby U material. Yabby U was a producer in the 1970s who's, at the time I discovered these releases, his music was not well known outside of the hardcore record collector circles. This was actually, I believe, the first music I ever heard by him. It was King Tubby's Prophecy of Dub, Yabby U. It's a dub album of some of his most crucial slices of roots reggae. Absolutely deep, heavy, mystical vibes. Do have that one on vinyl as well. By this time, they had switched. They were starting to release these through Simply Vinyl for a time. Next up was the singer Horace Andy, who later became more well known for his work with Massive Attack. In the Light and the dub version, In the Light dub, released on one CD. These were originally released on the Hungry Town label in New York in the late 70s. I have the vinyl edition of In the Light, the vocals, but I do not have the dubs on vinyl as yet. Next up came Tapazuki in dub. The next release was the first one I bought from the label when it was new. I spotted it on the shelves at the local HMV store, I think. Knew nothing about the artist. I was still fairly new to reggae. I'd never heard of the Blood and Fire label, but I bought it based on strictly on the cover art. As I've said, Blood and Fire wanted to raise the standard of reggae releases as far as the cover art, the sound quality, kind of just the whole archival presentation to kind of match that of other genres such as jazz. Steve Arrow, also a big jazz fan. And it was the 9th release on the label, The Congos, Heart of the Congos, which was an absolute stone-cold, mind-blowing classic out of Lee Perry's Black Ark studio, late 70s. Originally released, received kind of a limited release. Blood and Fire expanded it to a 2-CD edition with extended mixes and archival booklet. Unfortunately, I do not have the vinyl of this as yet. I was only buying CD at the time. Absolutely essential release on every level of the word. Still one of my all-time favorite albums, any genre of music. Next up, Jah Stitch, another DJ album. He had appeared on that first compilation, original Ragamuffin. King Tubby and Soul Syndicate, Freedom Sounds in dub. Also have that one on vinyl. Next up, another dub one, Scientist, Dub in the Roots Tradition. And then kind of a sequel to the earlier Dub Gone Crazy, now Dub Gone Too Crazy. Another King Tubby, compilation of King Tubby mixed sides. I have that one on double LP. So kind of a heavyweight trilogy of dub releases right there. Next up, the singer Prince Allah, Only Love Can Conquer, compilation on him. Yet another dub album, Glenn Brown, Termination dub, essential sides from him. Next up was a very excellent DJ release from one of the all-time great DJ artists of Jamaica, I-Roy. One of the more literate, pop culture savvy wordsmiths of the day. Also have that one on vinyl. You can see kind of the Blood and Fire art style there of the early releases. Next up, the 17th release on the label was a compilation. 2 heavyweight, just a sampler designed to promote the label. Morewell Unlimited followed, another dub one. Mixed King Tubbies. Return to Horace Andy followed. Good Vibes, another very excellent album by him. Expanded with extended tracks. And I do have the Simply Vinyl edition of that. Return to Yabby You, and one of the most epic releases ever on the label. It is called Jesus Dread, Yabby You. This was a compilation they put reinterpreting, reappraising his work, which at that time, as I said, was not terribly well known outside of the cognoscenti, who had maybe been around for these records at the same time. Expanded 2 CD set, compilation of sides with his vocals, DJ versions, instrumentals, absolutely blazing roots all the way through. Very excellent. For many of us just getting into reggae at that time, that was our first exposure to his music. You couldn't find it anywhere. There weren't any reissues out. As I've said, the Heart of the Congos one was my first exposure to the label. Through picking that up, I discovered their website, which had a message board and forum where many of the most knowledgeable fans and collectors on the world would get together and chat. Many whom were, and the occasional artist and producer. Many of those fans have gone on to make their own mark in reggae circles, be it DJing, doing podcasts, starting their own labels, even doing YouTube videos. U Brown, Train to Zion followed. Another 70s DJ collection. Return to Dub, Forward the Bass, Impact All-Stars, dub from Randy's record label, which eventually evolved into VP, currently the biggest reggae label in the world, based out of New York, following their move to the US from Jamaica. Next up was kind of an underappreciated release at the time, but for my money, one of their most excellent ones. Basically, Junior Biles' collection of sides recorded for the Jah Man label. It's called Junior Biles and Friends, 129 Beat Street, Jah Man Special. But also includes other artists like Brigadier Jerry, Bim Sherman, Pablo Moses. Just excellent spiritual roots reggae. Also have that one on vinyl. Was very happy to find that one. Replica of the Jah Man label there. Next up, Johnny Clark, Dread or Dread. Compilation of his sides. One of my favorite Blood and Fire covers there. Another King Tubby, Dub Like Dirt. Ubiquitous Bunny Lee there. One of the most prolific producers in reggae in the 70s. Next up, they released Max Romeo, Open the Iron Gate. Another compilation of heavyweight roots music. Another kind of a little appreciated one at the time, but absolutely sublime quality of music. Children of Jah, Chantels and Friends. These are sides originally released on the Phase 1 label. So you got the Chantels and U Brown, Errol Davis, The Terrors, Lopez Walker. Beautiful stuff. Fat Man Rhythm Section, aka the Lewis Brothers, bass and drum duo behind the Inner Circle Band. You might know them from the Bad Boys, the theme song from Cops years later. Collection of dub sides from them. Heavyweight dub. Cornell Campbell, another longtime reggae root singer, I Shall Not Remove, still active today. Another DJ, Trinity, Shantytown Determination followed. By now we are up to BAF CD 31 in the year 2000. Compilation of Linval Thompson produced sides. Actually with himself as artist, he would later move into production. Was quite a heavyweight producer in the early 80s as the sound shifted to dancehall. Silford Walker, Lambsbread International. You can see kind of the art style is beginning to change with these releases here. Next up was one of those epical releases they would put out every once in a while. Compilation on the DJ Big Youth, 3 CD edition with booklet. Various sides on there, recorded in the 70s. They did one with Gregory Isaacs, reissuing his Mr. Isaacs LP with expanded track list. The next release, the 36th on the label, was kind of a departure. It was a various artists compilation based on reggae covers of soul and funk hits from America. It was called Darker Than Blue, Soul from Jam Down. Kind of a controversial release at the time. There was quite a bit of debate amongst fans on the forum whether that was on the worthwhileness of this release. Blood and Fire was basically a roots reggae label, and here they were doing covers of soul hits of the 70s, but it turned out to be absolutely another sublime masterpiece. Excellent, excellent music on there. DJ compilation of 90 The Observer releases followed. Microphone Attack. Return to Yabby U, Dub It to the Top. They did a couple of releases with the great singer Dennis Brown. This was The Promised Land, sourced from various releases. Two CD set rather. Prince Alan Jr. Ross, I Can Hear the Children Singing. 2 CD set of various cuts, some extended mixes on there. Return to the Jah Man label, this time for a dub compilation, In the Dub Zone. 23 tracks there. Jackie Matu, Always iconic covers from him. Instrumental Bunny Lee productions again of keyboard instrumentals over some top Bunny Lee rhythms of the time. Another DJ set followed, Ranking Joe, Zion High. 43rd release on the label there. Instrumental set from Tommy McCook, kind of putting two albums called Blazing Horns and Tenor and Roots together. Kind of roots instrumentals from one of the founding members of the Skatalites. Now, Blood and Fire did a couple of kind of unusual releases. The first one they put out was called the Departure from a reissue, and they put new music out. Now, this one was called Tree of Sata, based on the Sata Masagana rhythm from the Abyssinians. And this was where they took, Blood and Fire Records actually took the basic, the vintage rhythm track and brought in a bunch of, and put a compilation of vintage tracks with some new artists as well doing on there. Tree of Sata. They would do a following one like this based on the Congos Fisherman album from that Heart of the Congos album. This was late in the label's career. It was called Fisherman Style. Only have this one on vinyl. With various artists featuring some vintage artists like Biggie Youth, Horace Andy, the original cut by the Congos, as well as more modern artists like Luciano, Lutan Faya. They actually issued a number of 7-inch singles, which I do have here. Congos, Fisherman, Michael Rose, lead singer of Black Uhuru, Max Romeo, who also did that Open the Iron Gate release earlier, Lutan Fire, kind of a newer generation of DJ, great Horace Andy, and Luciano, one of the preeminent roots reggae singers who emerged in the 1990s. Further Dennis Brown release would follow, dub sides produced by him. Then the little-known Willie Williams, Messenger Man. Also have this one on vinyl. 2 LP set there. Prince Farai compilation, Silver and Gold. And the final regular release from the album was Return to Yabi You, Deliver Me from My Enemies, later album from him. Do have the vinyl edition of this one. Again, double. Now by this time we're into 2003. By this time, kind of the general downturn in sales in the music industry had taken its toll on Blood and Fire. Cash flow was tight. They had a distributor bankruptcy, which was a huge financial blow to the label, and ultimately they were not able to continue as a functioning entity. In 2004, I believe they released a sampler called Singer Man, and that was it for the label, until there were rumors of a revival of the label to be distributed by BP Records out of New York, with some reissues of their previous releases with expanded track lists. Unfortunately, a financial agreement could not be agreed upon. A huge sticking point with Blood and Fire was that their arrangement with the artists to be paid fairly would stand. So all that ended up appearing was a 12-inch for Record Store Day of Gregory Isaacs, Mr. Know-It-All, which was 2014 through the VP Music Group. And that was it to date for Blood and Fire proper. VP, through that deal, did manage to acquire rights to some of the Blood and Fire catalog, and some of their recent releases have been repackagings of titles that originally came on Blood and Fire. So as I said, hugely influential label to me, a massive part of my reggae education, and that is my tribute to Blood and Fire. Hope you guys enjoyed, and cheers.